When I was a kid, I obviously didn't have the money to buy whatever games I wanted, so whatever games my parents could afford received all the time and gratitude I had. I didn't seek out gaming news or have a Nintendo Power subscription, so my gaming knowledge as a youth revolved heavily around Mario, DK, Pokemon, and Smash Brothers, which supplemented my Nintendo education, but I never played a Zelda or a Metroid until I either emulated or bought them as an adult.
Not once!
I never even heard of it until high school, by which point I wasn't really eager to jump into a cartoony platformer unless it was one I'd already grown up with. But when my interest in gaming rekindled, I took a trip back in time through the wonderful world of ROMs. I played so many of the games I missed out on. Eventually, I got to it. Banjo-Kazooie. After constantly seeing it worshipped as the best 3D platformer on the platform, better even than the granddaddy of them all,
Bear is best.
I knew I had to play it. So I did. And I still didn't get it. I don't know, man, I just wasn't into it.
Michael!
However, years later, quite recently in fact, I gave it another chance. And holy moly, I totally get it now. I freaking love these games. I may not ever have that childhood nostalgia for these games, but I still totally fell for them. There is so much to love. These games just ooze charm from every pore. They're some of the most fun and well-designed games of their kind. It was even technically ahead of its time, with optional tutorials and collectibles that don't eject you from the level. And it's funny, like Paper Mario funny.
The grunty one physically abuses the shrill one, and the shrill one psychologically abuses the grunty one, and it really plays. It's really funny.
Now before we get into the main thing we all want, let me say something about remakes. It's hard to sink your thumbs into an N64 game today without having already grown up with it. The graphics and controls are still doable, but they wear their age on their cartwork. I can't even play those Zeldas off the 3DS.
Not once!
The Xbox versions upscale the resolutions a notch, but they're still blocky, low polycount graphics of the late 90s. It would be nice if Rare gave their best IP the treatment the other 90s platform mascots recently got, although I am glad to say the Xbox version fixed my one single qualm with this game.
Too many notes.
I'm gonna erase your memories, start over again.
So, what do I want from this series? More importantly, what do its longtime original fans want? My friends, we want Banjo 3E. But before we can discuss
The future!
first we must discuss as for the present.
There's no now!
For the uninitiated, Banjo-Kazooie is about a bear named Banjo who's
Such a cool guy!
and a bird that lives in his backpack named Kazooie, who is
Kind of a bitch.
The two friends like eating, sleeping, gaming, gambling, and playing their namesake instruments in their band with Banjo's flute-playing sister Tootie and their friend Mumbo Jumbo, best shaman and percussionist in-game. One day, Gruntilda, the evil witch next door, has a conversation with her cauldron that goes something like this.
You're not that great! Make you feel good!
But she took it like this.
Maybe it's just because you're ugly.
So she brews up a scheme to absorb the hotness out of Tootie and inject it into herself, like that South Park parody of Great Expectations. So Banjo and Kazooie, with the aid of Mumbo, Bottles, and other kooky characters that amount to anything with a pair of googly eyes,
Am I ugly? My eyes!
set off on an adventure to save her. They storm the witch's lair, collecting jiggies to explore the various worlds within and saving Jinjos from a terrible fate. In a final sequence, the bear and bird play a quiz show based on their own game and face off with Grunty atop her keep, summoning the Jinjo Mater to strike the final blow. A blow so hard it impales her into her own grave, with a massive rock sealing it like a tombstone. The game ends with the gang relaxing on a beach, and an in-game teaser of the sequel. And holy moly, what a sequel. This is how you do a sequel. Banjo-Tooie came out and takes place 2 years after the original. Grunty's still trapped under the rock that her genius assistant can't move, so her other two sisters, who apparently exist, come through to save her. But she's rotted down to her bones, and instead of looking attractive, now she's just concerned with restoring her body back to its original ugliness.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
They destroy Spiral Mountain, kill Bottles, and return to their faraway lair to suck the life out of the whole land with a satellite thing. So Banjo and Kazooie set off on yet another adventure to stop her. But it doesn't stop there. Now, the original took place in their respective homes of Spiral Mountain and Grunty's Lair, a hub world that led to 9 other worlds. The sequel then revealed that the entire place was just one part of an even bigger, more open hub world called the Isle o' Hags. The worlds are more expansive and interconnected as if they were extensions of the hub world. Jinjos have their own village and are spread across the worlds divided by families of color.
Racist.
The Jiggy paintings are actual jigsaw puzzles you have to solve. Mumbo Jumbo is playable and Humba Wumba grants transformations.
That's racist.
Bottles becomes a ghost, but you retain the moves he taught you in the original while learning new moves from his military brother. Characters from the first game continue their stories. It is significantly more challenging, and it's somehow even funnier. I adored the continuity in this series. It's not a standalone sequel where it's like, oh, you don't have to play the first one to understand this. No, you do. And also, why wouldn't you? By picking up right where it left off, it truly feels like a continuation of the original. This is how you do a sequel. I am of the persuasion that the sequel is far superior to the original. They're both masterpieces, but I prefer Tooie to Kazooie. That was great. Anyway, after conquering another 9 worlds, another self-debasing game show with some serious family feud, and another final battle, the game ends with Jinjos rescued, Bottles resurrected, Krungo switching sides, and Grunty further reduced to a skull used as a hacky sack. Before fading out, she swears revenge in yet another tease for yet another sequel. And there it is, the tale of Bear and Bird. There was also Grunty's Revenge, the GBA interquel, and then, of course, there's Nuts and Bolts.
Oh, nuts.
If it was just a spin-off, or if vehicles were just integrated as a new feature in a proper successor, I think it would have been embraced far more forgivingly, if it had a mainline title to back it up. And it's worth noting that although the gameplay isn't there, the world is still the same. It has the same humor, and it even references how different it is. Like how the years without games, they sat around getting fat and can't perform their old moves anymore. That's hilarious. Because continuity is such an issue here, there's no way to speculate on Banjo 3E without asking what could prospectively happen after Tooie. Greg Mayles and the old team at Rare obviously had plans for a third game, so if this project was revived, they would certainly dig those up and blow the dust off. But in addition, they could use the huge time gap to their advantage. I believe 3E should follow up Tooie the same way Tooie followed up Kazooie. It's been over 20 years since the last game, so the game should also take place 20 years later. 20 years after the land was saved from the Coven of Ugly, the whole cast enjoyed a life free of stress and conflict. Until one day, Grunty plots to absorb the energy of the whole planet this time in order to restore her body not just to its original ugliness, but just restore it in general. After a long life of leisure, it's time for another adventure. And this can work whether they acknowledge Nuts and Bolts or pretend it never existed. Now this is just one example, and it segues me into the next subject, setting. What's better, a brand new world or an old classic world?
Is there a third door?
A mixture of both. Since it's been so long, nostalgia would benefit a return to the original setting. And since the same amount of time has passed in-game, a lot can change in 20 years. Some past levels like Mumbo's Mountain and Freeze Easy Peak can return completely reimagined, while the ruins of others like Witchy World and Grunty Industries lay beneath and beside the new ones. Imagine a big HD Spiral Mountain, or maybe the Isle o' Hags is just one island in the Great Wicca Palagio. show. All of the islands are like levels in 3D platformers, but instead of being surrounded by a sea of homogeneous backgrounds, they're surrounded by an actual sea you can sail around like Wind Waker. I'm picturing a collectathon with an overworld instead of a hub world. I want Banjo 3E to expand on the gameplay and story and their overlap in a similar fashion to 2E. Continue the stories of Gobi, Jolly Roger, and other characters. Jinjo Village has grown into a whole town, the capital center of the Isle Hags, which had its name changed to the Isle Honey or something. Retain the abilities from the first two, tweak them to modern standards, and introduce some fresh ones. Themes for levels they didn't touch on, like fantasy, space, a city, a rareware museum, more playable characters, more jiggy jigsaw puzzles, and a deeper dive into the lore of the Jiggy. More minigames like the FPS based on other genres like RPGs or side-scrollers. After all, there is a lot of self-aware gaming humor in these games. Make their instruments a prominent feature like the instruments of Zelda games. Also, other than Grunty at the end, the original has no boss fights.
You just a bar. I just a what, bitch?
I expected big, epic DK64 style bosses, but I never once fought a boss.
Not once.
2E had bosses in each level, but they weren't climactic end-of-level bosses. And what the hell happened to Tootie? They saved her and then she winds up missing on a milk carton? Obviously, this is one of the ideas they had long planned for a threequel, and these are just some examples. The internet is full of forum threads with people venting out their ideas for this game that probably won't ever happen. So goddamn it, Rare. Use mine, use theirs, think up better ones, use mine and theirs and yours and combine them and make them better. Just do something! Banjo 3E was bound to happen, but when Microsoft swooped in and acquired Rare, the future fell apart. The studio lost its essence, and so too did its properties. Banjo-Kazooie would make 3 more visits to the world in the forms of a side-scrolling interquel, a vehicle construction flop, and a spiritual successor that was proposed by Rareware veterans and kickstarted by ravenous fans within 4 minutes. Reception was slightly mixed, but I thought Yooka-Laylee was pretty damn good, but it's no Banjo 3E. We all want it to be made. We'd prefer it to be made by the original team under the direction of Greg Mayles, who now runs Rare, and we'd love it on the Nintendo Switch. Sadly, none of that seems likely. Even with the inclusion of the duo in Smash Bros., although that alone is so monumental that it merits this reaction. From the Ace Ventura boy in a canned RPG called Dream, to Diddy Kong Racer, to the platforming mascot beloved by many, Banjo-Kazooie was destined to be the Mario, the Rayman, the Sonic of Rare, but in a sad twist of fate, they ended up more like the Crash, the Spyro, the Sonic, and the many other platforming mascots of the 90s. They died too young, and we'll never know what could have been, but we still have their legacy. We still have them in Smash, and we still have these 2 awesome games with which people will relive their childhoods or discover anew. We still have
Huh?